So, start na. Good day to all of you. We are the Group 5 and we are in front of you to discuss Chapter 3, Lesson 2, Lens. First of all, I'm Nestor Zarel Armirin and I'll be the first presenter. Next slide, please. To begin with, we have lens. Lens refers to a small object or a transparent glass that refracts light rays. When we hear the word refract, it means the light rays will change direction when it enters the lens. By the mechanism of that, it will form an image. Next slide, please. Distinction between simple lenses and compound lenses. So the simplest difference between the two is that simple lenses contain only one lens, while compound lenses contain two or multiple lenses. A great example of simple lens is the magnifying glass, which we use to magnify objects for us to see it clearly or to see detail. We also use magnifying glass to see our fingerprint pattern. While an example for compound lenses is the microscope, which we use to see things that our naked eyes cannot see, such as cells or viruses. Next slide, please. There are two types of lens which serve different purposes and have different sizes. Next slide, please. First of all, we have the converging, which is also known as convex, biconvex, and positive lens. As you may see in the illustration, coming from the left side are the light rays. When it enters the convex lens, the light rays will intersect because from the word itself, converge, which means to unite or to put it together. The purpose of this is to make an image that come from a distance will be seen up closely. A great example of that is the binocular. The binocular contains two convex lenses, which we use to see distant places up close. Next slide, please. Second is the diverging, or also known as concave, biconcave, and negative lens. As you may see in the illustration, coming from the left side, the light rays will enter in the concave lens. Then it will have different direction because from the word implies diverge, which means to be separated. The purpose of this is to widen or expound the direction of the light rays. A great example for this is the flashlight. A great example of this is the flashlight. That if you may observe, the flashlight contains light bulbs inside. When we turn it on, it will enter the concave lenses, and when it go outside, the light will be expounded or to be widened. If you may ask, what is the importance of this lens? These two types of lens are very crucial for us human beings, especially for those persons who have problem in their eyes. Because if a person is nearsighted, he needs a convex glass to see far-sighted objects. While a person is a farsighted, he needs concave glasses for him to see letters or words up close.
So good evening, everyone. I am Friends Adrian M. Leones, discussing the parts of lens. Next slide. So the filter thread is the lines or the threaded section in front of the lens. In that area is where the accessories will be attached. Accessories like filter and lens hood. And there are two types of filters. The first one is the drop-in filter or square filter that can easily put by dropping it in the holder at the front of the camera lens. Second filter is the rear filters. This type of filter is a little hard to attach because you need to remove the lens first, then attach the filter inside the lens or behind the rear element. So, what is the lens hood? It is the accessory that attached in front of the camera lens. So, dito na magagamit ang filter thread. Ilalagay lang ang lens hood sa filter thread sa harap ng lens at iikutin ito pa-clockwise. The lens hood blocks the stray light from focusing flare in your photographs. And also, it helps to protect the lens from damage if you bump into something. Next slide, please. Next is the focusing ring. It is a small ring on the lens body which moves the lens elements inside. So if you rotate the focusing ring, ang image ay mag-focus ito or mag-blur, depende kung saan mo niro-rotate. Next slide, please. And there are two types of focus lens. First is the manual focus lens, and second is the automatic focus lens. When you use the manual focus lens, you will manually focus the lens by rotating the focus ring and balance it on the distance indicator. While the autofocus, the lens will automatically focus on the object without a hassle. And there are some types of lenses that has a switch of autofocus and manual. If you use the manual mode, then you want to use the focus mode, you can easily hit the switch. Showing at the second picture. Next. Now, the distance indicator indicate and shows the distance of the object from the lens and for the purpose of focusing to infinity. Film and analog have a built-in distance indicator. So makita niyo sa screen, may nakalagay dyan na mga numbers na nag-i-indicate sa distance ng object. Next slide. Next is the lens specification markings. Numbers with millimeters are called the focal length. A focal length range will have two numbers separated by a dash. For example, the lens stamp 18 to 55 mm. It means that the focal length is a fixed 55 mm lens. Next slide, please. Next, this is another distance indicator. The main use is for close-up photography. The approximate distance of object is measured from the front of the lens. Next slide, please. The depth of field indicators. The lenses that have distance indicators usually have depth of field indicators. The depth of field indicator shows the approximate depth of field, and the indicators marked as 22, 11, and 8. Next, please. Next, the aperture ring. Aperture means opening and describes the size of the hole in a lens. Aperture ring is the collar on the camera that can be rotated to increase or decrease the aperture. So, pasabot sa ibig sabihin niyan, kapag maliit ang aperture mo, less light siya. Pero pag malaki naman ang aperture mo, more light. Lastly, next slide, is the zoom ring found in every digital recorder and digital cameras. If you use the zoom ring by rotating it in any direction, it will reduce or enlarge the subject in an image. That's all.
Good, eve- Good evening. I'm Kevin Charles M. Serrano, And my topic for today is tonight is all about camera lens characteristics. First is focal length. Focal length is the distance from the center of the lens to the focal points of the lens. The longer focal length leads to higher magnification and a narrower angle of view. Shorter focal length is associated with lower magnification and a wider angle of view. Next, aperture is a hole opening through which light travel. More specifically, the aperture and the focal length of an optical system determine the cone angle of a bundle of rays that come to a focus in the image plane. An optical system typically has many openings or structures that limit the ray bundles. These structures may be the edge of the lens or mirror or a ring or the fixture that holds an optical element in place such as diaphragm placed in the optical path to limit the light admitted by the system. This structure is called aperture stop. Next, depth of field. For cameras that can only focus on the object distance at a time, depth of field is the distance between the nearest and the farthest object that are in acceptably sharp focus. Sharp focus is defined using property called circle of confusion. The depth of field can be determined by focal length distance to subject, the acceptable circle of confusion, size, and aperture. Limitations of depth of field can sometimes be overcome with various techniques and equipments. As the distance or the size of the acceptable circle of confusion increases, the depth of field increases. Increasing the size of aperture or increasing the focal length reduce the depth of field. Next, image stabilization. It's a technique that reduces blurring associated with the motion of camera or other imaging device during exposure. Generally, it compensates for pan and tilt angular movement of the imaging device. Though electronic image stabilization can also compensate for rotation. Image image stabilization can facilitate shutter speeds to 2.5 stops slower, exposure for to 22.5 times longer, and even slower effective speed have been reported. Next, zoom lenses. It's a mechanical assembly of lens elements for which the focal length and this angle of view can be varied as opposed to a fixed focal lens. The conveyance of variable focal length comes at the cost of complexity and some promises and image quality, weight, dimension, aperture, autofocus, performances, and cost. For example, all zoom lenses suffer from at least light, if not considerable, loss of image resolution at their maximum aperture, especially at, at the extremes of their focal length range. Next, prime lenses is a fixed focal length photographic lens as opposed to a zoom lenses, typically with a maximum aperture from f2.8 to f1.2. The term can also mean the primary lens in combination lens system. While prime lens of a given focal length is less versatile than a zoom lens, it is often of superior optical quality, wider maximum aperture, lighter weight, and smaller size. These advantages stem from having fewer moving parts, optical elements optimized for one particular focal length, and a less complicated lens formula that creates fewer optical aberration issues. Larger maximum aperture, smaller f number facilities photography in lower light and shallower depth of field.
Good day, everyone. I am Jana C. Dakoykoy, the next reporter. So earlier, Mr. Serrano discussed the types of camera lenses, and one of it is the prime lenses. And today, I will be the one to discuss its categories. So first category is the wide-angle lenses. It covers a wider area or captures much more of the scene than the normal lenses. It is great for capturing landscape, architectural building, interior, large groups, or anything that requires more background when taking pictures. So this lens is usually sharp, small, and lightweight. And these lenses with a focal length below 45 millimeters are under this category. So this is the example of an image captured using the wide angle lenses. Next is the standard or normal lenses. Its focal length range is 45 millimeters to 60 millimeters, which is similar to how we humans see the area or the surroundings. It is good and usually used in everyday picture taking situation. So these are the lenses, the normal or the standard lenses. Next is the telephoto lenses. It is a long focus lens that narrows the field view and magnify the scene for closer view. It makes the subject appear closer than it actually is. Unlike the wide angle lenses, telephoto lenses are heavier, larger, and less convenient to carry around, but it is ideal for situations where you cannot or don't want to get close to the subject. And the medium telephoto lens is the medium telephoto lens has a focal length range 70 millimeters to 135 millimeters, and the super telephoto lenses has a focal length range 300 millimeters and above. So this is the example of an image captured using the telephoto lenses. Next is the macro lenses. It is used for very close-up photography, which has a smaller minimum focusing distance than the normal camera. It allows you to focus extremely close to a subject or taking images of very small subject, just like in this photo. And next is the specialty lenses, which are created for special reasons. So there are three. First is the fisheye lens. It is an ultra-wide lens that can take the entire 180 degrees radius around it. It produces images that appears distorted and gives bubble appearance to an image. So this is the example of the fisheye lens. Next is the tilt shift lens. It makes the subject appear smaller than its actual size. It allows a remarkable control on the perspective with a combination of tilting and shifting. Next is the infrared lens. It is a lens that plays with the light and it filters out the other lights and uses infrared light to create a unique visual effects. It is commonly used to obtain false color or black and white images. Next is the lens aberration. So what is an aberration? It is an imperfection that occurs when the light fails to converge rays of light to a single point. So there is no perfect lens. There is no such thing as perfect lens. That's why it requires a high degree of engineering involved in a lens to reduce the lens aberration problems. And that's all for my part. And the type of lens aberration will be discussed by the next reporter. Thank you.
So, good day everyone. My name is Jervin J. Ponce, and today I'm going to discuss the two types of lens aberration, different types of chromatic aberration, and lastly, the subtypes of monochromatic aberration. Next, please. So, chromatic aberration. The inability of a lens to focus all the color or wavelength at the same plane. This is normally only noticeable in a long telephoto lens. So, as you can see, sa unang picture is more reddish siya. Kasi ang lens dito ay mas nakafocus siya sa red na color or wavelength na nasasagap ng camera. So, that is the one defect of the lens that is called chromatic aberration. Next, please. So, the different types of chromatic aberration. So, the first one was the longitudinal chromatic aberration occurs when different wavelengths of color do not converge at the same point after passing through a lens, leading to the color fringing around the subject through the entire image. So, the second one was the lateral chromatic aberration occurs when, due to the angle of light entering the lens, different wavelength of color focus on the same plane but at different positions. So these both types of chromatic aberration can produce colored edges, but they have a difference. The longitudinal chromatic aberration causes colored fringes all around the object, while the lateral chromatic only affects the tangential object. Next, please. So, monochrome aberration are the resultant imperfection when lenses can't focus a single color of light. The aberration is due to imperfections in a lens optical system. So, next, please. So, subtypes of monochromatic aberration. First one was the astigmatism, the inability of a lens to focus in both horizontal and vertical plane at the same time, or the inability of a lens to focus in both lines running in different directions. So this problem of lens can focus horizontal and vertical plane at the same time and cannot produce a sharp images. So that's all for the astigmatism. Next, please. So last one was the spherical aberration. Photographic rays passing through edges of a lens are bent or refracted more sharply than those passing through the lens. Thus, they come to focus nearer the lens than those of the central rays. So, ang nakikita niya na image ay kuha na spherical aberration, which is hindi gaano sharp yung image kasi the rays passing through the edges, yun yung nagiging more focus compared to the rays that passing through the center of lens. So that's all.
for this is my topic for now, chromatic aberration. So also known as coma, this type of aberration occurs mainly near the edges of wide angle lenses. So bali pasabot ani is instead ang entry sa light source kay naa sa center sa lens, dito siya mo sulod sa edges of the camera frame. Bali tungod ani wala nakafocus ang light rays, so ang shape sa distortion kay parehas sa comet. Field curvature, also known as Petzval field curvature. So description for the aberration is that a planar object will have a curved appearance. This happens pag ang visible light rays kay nakafocus sa imaginary curved surface. Instead sa that plane, pag tanaw nimo sa picture, nakafocus ang center pero ang edges wala. That's why curved appearance. Distortion. It is the deformation of an image. Naay 3 types of distortion. First, kay barrel distortion. Magnification decrease with distance from the axis, bali ang edges sa image kay gamay kaysa center. Second type kay Hinantian distortion. Increase gapon ni siya sa distance from the axis, so ang edges sa image kay mas dako ang appearance compared sa center. Moustache, kaning third distortion, moustache distortion occurs when ang lens kaysa nag-exhibit og wavy lines. So due to the central and edges distortion, so naay bali other lens defects. Flare, types of flare. This happens when lens is district at a strong light source similar to the sun. Ang excess rays of light will be reflected sa lens surface and blanking effect sa camera's minor frame. So nabali nakani ditong 2 types of mechanical flare. Light is reflected from same bright spot within a faulty lens shade. So kaning optical flare, light is reflected as it strikes individual light sources. So next, ghost. So ghost is a discourse when unaided light reflects on the lens surface and minor frame. So na yung mga reflection in front and behind sa lens nga aperture na maghatag o ghost appearance.
So, good day everyone. I am Janayan Valencia, and I'm going to continue the report. Air bubble lenses. Optical glass usually contains small air bubbles which form during heating process and production. A bubble in optical glass of a modern lens is uncommon but not unheard of. Generally, such bubbles do not degrade image quality. If the bubble is close to the surface, damage due to a blow increases. Mostly a bubble of the lens is a cosmetic defect. So why is there's a bubble in the lens? Air bubbles typically arise from improper application of a scleral lens or poor lens fit. If a bubble arises from improper application, it will be there immediately upon insertion. Next. Newton rings are Newton rings are a phenomenon in which an interference pattern is created by the reflection of light between two surfaces, typically a spherical surface and a adjacent touching flat surface. It is named after Isaac Newton, who invented the effect in 1666. When viewed with monochromatic light, Newton rings appears as a series two surfaces which view with the white light and forms concentrate ring pattern of rainbow colors because the different wavelength of the light interface at different thicknesses of the air layer between the surfaces. Next, please. So, achromatic lens. A lens which is especially designed to control the effect of chromatic distortion or aberration. A detect of an optical lenses to bring the focus of all colors to the same convergence point. It's called an achromatic lens. Is widely known as a achromatic. Correction in lenses is made by bringing the wavelength of both the lenses into focus on the same plane. The wavelength generally are in red and blue color. A lens which is specially designed to control the effects of chromatic distortion or aberration. Apochromatic lens. Apochromatic lens, also known as a triple. It uses a series of three lenses. It provides better correction of aberration and significantly reduced dispersion versus monochromatic and achromatic lenses. It corrects for three wavelengths, blue, red, and green, to reduce chromatic aberration, and it's correct for two wavelengths to reduce spherical aberration. An achromat or apochromat lens is an photographic or the other lens that has better correction is chromatic or spherical aberration that much more common achromat lens